want to welcome everyone to the Community IT webinar, Equity Guide for Nonprofit Tech. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT. I'll be the moderator today. I'm very happy to hear today from our guest, Tristan Penn from NTEN, who is going to walk us through using their free download, Equity Guide for Nonprofit Tech. They also have a companion resource for nonprofit boards concerned with technology use and equity and inclusion. So you can download that also from their website. First, I'm going to go over our learning objectives. So we hope that by the end of the hour today, you will understand equity issues impacting nonprofits through technology tools and processes that we use. Learn how funding equitable nonprofit technology ensures better outcomes. Discuss the role of nonprofit technology in disrupting existing inequitable models, and learn the role of your board in tech equity discussions and assessments, and why these types of discussions kind of rise to that board level. And I'm so happy to welcome Tristan Penn. So Tristan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Tristan Penn, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm Navajo, and I'm the Director of Equity and Accountability at NTEN, and I've been with NTEN for about, 7 years in October. So a bit of time. It still feels like I'm the new person, and maybe I'm just like desperately holding on to that new person role, but I'm so not new there now, so I can't do that. But I've been working in nonprofit for about 21 years, and the bulk of that, the other 14 years, was in youth development, mental health, and education. So I did all that time with a few organizations, few nonprofit organizations across the Midwest and the East Coast, or sorry, the West Coast. And so um, come with a lot of experiences. I'm sure we all do that work in nonprofit, but I am so happy to be here and, present on our guide for technology, our nonprofit guide for technology, and also any questions that may come up for you all too. And just be in discussion and dialogue with you all about things that are going on with everyone. So happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to welcome you too. Can you tell us a little bit more about
Yeah.
Intent?
Yeah, absolutely. So NTEN is an organization, it's a national nonprofit that we don't have a a lot of times nonprofits have like a direct service arm. So like the Humane Society has like, the place where you go where you look at like the animals, and that's their direct service point. We all know what that is. And NTEN doesn't really have that. Our service point is helping other nonprofits. So that's like the cool thing. We're a capacity building nonprofit for the sector. Through the lens of tech. So what we do is, and before y'all joined the call, Carolyn and I were talking, and Carolyn identified herself as an accidental techie, and that's really the types of folks that we engage with, and maybe not accidental techie, but just accidental insert whatever role that you went into, because we've all had that story that's like, oh gosh, well, I'm the operations director, but like I just came in as like the volunteer coordinator, and like all of a sudden I assumed this role and I had to learn as I went and build the plane as I go. And we all have those roles and experiences that we've had. And that's where N10 steps in. 21 years ago, N10, or actually more than 21 years now, I believe it's around 23 years ago, N10 decided with technology in particular that like folks were, you know, the internet and like all of this really great tech was happening at around 2000, and these folks were learning as they went, and they wanted to create a collective and a community resource for folks to get together and learn from each other and provide any sort of training, insight, collective training that they could. And so N10 was born. And so from that, that accidental techie mantra or belief, we've expanded, and now we do everything through the layer of tech, but it's like tech touches so much more than just the IT director, right? And so, as an operations director, as a CEO, as the programs director, as any in any level and any role, we're technologists. We engage and interact with technology, and it's incumbent upon us to stay up to date and also be in community with other folks who are in our similar roles and have similar experiences. And that's what NTEN does. We provide resources, we provide community. We have an online forum for all sorts of folks that are in different roles, and it's fairly active. We have tech clubs that happen in person across the country, at any in a host of cities. And I will say our big event that we put on each year is our NTC, which is the Nonprofit Technology Conference. It's in Detroit. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for plugging that in. And it's in Detroit this year. It brings around like 3,000 nonprofit folks from around the country to come together and um, and talk about the things that are important, attend sessions all through the lens of tech. Sometimes it's very broad and rooted in advocacy, and other times it's very particular and granular about like how did we merge or transition from one CRM to another, and what were the lessons learned and the things that we really succeeded on. So it covers everything too. So I know I'm not a tech person. I told Amy 7 years ago, I'm like, I just want to be clear. Like, I am so not a tech person. I am a like child youth development programs person. And they were like, that's what we need because we're all tech people and we need folks that like are able to not only work with the community, but really have a lot of their nonprofit experience rooted in community work. And so that's how I came about. And now I've become an accidental techie just by like being at N10. So that's what we do.
And I will put in a plug for that conference, the NTC conference. I've been several years, but last year, this past year in Baltimore was just fantastic. As Tristan said, there's a bunch of all different types of sessions on all different types of topics. It's member driven, so members vote on what the sessions are going to be and who the speakers are. There's always amazing keynote speakers, so I can recommend that in Detroit in March. That's the one thing I might not recommend is Detroit in March, but it's going to be a warm gathering of people, so
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So I'm Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Director of Marketing and Outreach at Community IT. And I was telling Tristan before I worked at Community IT, I was the tech director at a large international nonprofit. So I have seen both sides of the kind of technology questions. And a little bit more about Community IT. We're a 100% employee owned managed services provider. We provide outsourced IT support exclusively to nonprofits. Our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We are big fans of what well managed tech can do for your nonprofit and for your mission. We serve nonprofits across the United States. We've been doing it for almost 25 years. Next year is our anniversary. We are technology experts. We are consistently given an MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP, which is an honor we received again in 2025. I host a weekly podcast on different tech topics for nonprofits. We have this monthly free webinar series. You can also access all of our previous webinar videos and transcripts at communityit.com. You can register for upcoming webinars there. We have tons of just free downloads and free resources. So we hope that you'll take advantage of that because, as Tristan said, we're a community. We really believe that the more educated we all are about technology, even if you're not quote unquote the tech person, the better the nonprofit sector works. For these presentations, Community IT is vendor agnostic, so we only make recommendations to our clients and only based on their specific business needs. We never try to get a client into a product because we get an incentive or a hidden benefit from that. But we do consider ourselves a best of breed IT provider. So it's our job to know the landscape, what tools are available, reputable, and widely used. And we make recommendations on that basis for our clients based on their business needs, priorities, and budget. So that's another reason, Tristan, I'm so interested to hear about this guide because when we think about equity, and ethics and impact and potential harms to our communities, there
Yeah.
really are two big technology stacks that
Mhm.
I would say 99.9% of nonprofits use. You're either in the Microsoft world or you're in the Google Workspace
Yeah.
world. And so one of the things we kind of, there's a tension around is we can't really recommend a different technology, no
Yeah.
matter how ethical or unethical those technology giants are
Yeah.
behaving, because
Mhm.
that's really what there is. Like, there isn't a great nonprofit technology stack for nonprofits to use.
Right.
So that is something I'd love to hear more about how we
Sure.
think about that with the guide.
Mhm.
We're going to leave as much time as we can today for Q&A at the end, so you can submit questions through the chat feature. I'll either break in and ask Tristan, or we'll save them up for
Mhm.
the end, depending if it's a timely question.
Sure.
Um, we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can. Anything we can't get to, we're going to be on Reddit immediately after this webinar, and that link I'm going to stick in the chat. It's r/nonprofit IT management. So you can join us over there. And you can join us there at any time. We post different articles and resources for the community there. We're recording this presentation. I will send links to the video, podcast, and transcript within a week. So don't worry too much about taking notes. Please do stay to the end and take our survey as you exit the webinar, because your feedback really helps us improve and pick future topics you'd like to hear about. One lucky survey respondent chosen at random will win a $25 gift certificate. So that's another incentive to stay to the end and take the survey. A little bit more about us. As I said, our mission is to create value for the nonprofit sector through well-managed IT. We also identify four key values as employee owners that define our company: trust, knowledge, service, and balance. So we seek always to treat people with respect and fairness, to empower our staff, clients, and the sector to understand and use technology effectively, to be helpful with our talents. And we recognize that the health of our communities is vital to our well being, and that work is only a part of our lives. And with that, I'm going to put a thought question in chat. Oh, well, if you could put your answers in chat. So here are the questions. I've kind of thought about this in terms of seen and unseen. So, what equity issues around technology at your nonprofit are worrying you the most right now? So, what are you aware of and you're thinking about? So, an example would be, as I said, like, there really are two big, giant corporations for technology. So, that is one thing that we're very aware of at Community IT.
Mm.
But then also, I wonder if you could think about where do you worry that you might be missing technology equity issues? So unseen things, things that you don't know that you don't know. So I'm hoping that some of that will come out in this as well. So please feel free to, if you feel comfortable, putting that in the chat. I will not name names in the transcript, but it really helps our community when we know we're not alone in worrying about these issues. And so we're here today to start taking steps to address those. And I'm going to, at this point, stop sharing and turn it over to my friend Tristan um,
Wonderful.
to share
Okay.
this presentation.
Absolutely. I am going to get into it. I love all of these questions too, so I don't have the chat up. So, Carolyn, what was the question again? I remember you had said
Oh,
who
the
was
question for the chat
yeah.
was
Okay.
kind of the seen and unseen issues. So, is there something that you're aware of as you're
Hmm.
starting or on your equity journey that
Hmm.
you are really thinking about?
Hmm.
And do you have any sense of something that's maybe unseen that
Uh,
you have a blind spot around, or it's not on your radar?
hmm. Oh, okay, cool. So, ah, gosh, so many. I think we're gonna cover them in this presentation too. So like, please let me know. I don't want to get too ahead of myself too. And I already did my introduction too. Carolyn had done that already, but I just wanted to name a few things really quick. We're in this work together. Obviously, even though we come from different sectors, different types of nonprofit work, you know, arts and culture, community youth development work, everything in between. And I think that's the one thing that I really love about nonprofit in the years that I've been involved in it is that I get to have so many great connections, people that I've met that have now become, colleagues that have now become really good friends of mine that are just so wonderful and dynamic. And we're all doing work that is so important to us, but more importantly, it's upholding our sector in a really beautiful way too. So I just wanted to name that specifically during a time like this where things feel wonky and I just want to name and name it. Things feel uncertain. I know a lot of us have since like February when like federal funds were frozen, that things have become very, very tenuous for a lot of us, both like regionally, but also for our own organizations and what that means for sustainability, for contingency, and for like just hard brass and tacks financial stability. And so I just want to name that is like the context that I'm coming with as we, talk about equitable usage of technology too in our guide. Um, it's for you. That's what I said. And this guide is going to cover three sections. Three sections: usage, funding, and creating. So the usage of technology within nonprofits, funding of nonprofit technology from providers, and also maybe from yourself. And then also creating technology for nonprofits. And that's really centered on, folks who, organizations, companies, for profits that do create technology, and any tools that you all may be having with your current IT department, IT director, that maybe you created a cool little thing that, or a big tool that you're using that is custom made for your organization, and how that may look, sound, and feel as you're implementing it in your own work, but also like maybe that's something that you want to share too. So usage, funding, and creating. So that's the house that we're all going to be living in with those three rooms. Um, so using technology in equitable ways as a part of equitable work. So I love to start here because this is kind of where I really love to get analytical and talk about things. And again, I want to also point to Carolyn added the link for downloading of the equity guide. It is much longer than what I am presenting, but also like want to call out any sort of like additions to as you're hearing the information in the chat as well that like are coming up for you as well too. So and going along with that, if you all feel so called to like, incorporate even a bit of this into your work, we have a facilitator's guide that is a part of the download as well too. It can help you and guide you towards how you can facilitate this for large groups, small groups, or any other group in between. So thought I'd put that out there before. Um, so I think a big part of equitable usage of technology is making sure that you are promoting that equitable usage for your staff, more importantly, your staff, and also your constituents, your community members, any of those things. I start with staff because I had a mentor in the past that's really stuck with me, and it and they provided this like if you are wanting to provide any sort of like service, any sort of product, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, and you're so focused on the customer's always right or the community member's always right, that is like not the best way to get like your KPIs or whatever you want to call it, or your your impact out there. What you do is you start out with your staff because those staff members are not going to be able to implement, work through, provide any service, or believe in the mission and the values if they themselves are not being taken care of in a, in my opinion, holistic way, and also through like a very educational and professional development way. So making sure that you're providing them with a great foundation, not only in the training, but also like how you show up when they walk through the door on day one. So what does that mean? That means not assuming any technology expertise. And that may mean, walking back a few things and not assuming that folks know how to work or use a Gmail account. Or know how to use Google Calendars or Microsoft Teams. I think oftentimes folks think that that is like an inherent thought or an inherent practice that everyone just kind of knows. And I think that is a really tricky thing to get into if you're assuming that those baseline things like email or like Slack aren't something that you need to provide training and onboarding to, because the way NTEN uses Gmail and like G calendars is not going to be the same way. It may be very similar, but it may not be the same way in which another organization uses. So don't assume even the most basic pieces of technology that you think are like commonplace, that that's an expertise that folks might have. You still are required to provide, in terms of equitable usage of tech, a a good onboarding and orientation to how this simple piece of tech, email, is used in relation to the work and the organization. So, moving along with that, making sure that the training is accessible. What are you doing with your trainings at work? And when you're providing them and also receiving them, are they captioned? I know we have captions on today too. So are is it online? Is it in person? What is the setting? How can we best serve those who are getting that training in a way that they're going to receive that information, not only in a comfortable way, but in a way in which they learn? And that goes back to like assuming that people learn in a specific way. I used to work in education. And I was a long-term sub for kindergarten for a while. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see kids at that level learn in so many different ways, but also be fluent enough to be able to learn in maybe ways that weren't comfortable for them. So I would offer that. How are you? The word is differentiation. How are you differentiating your training and your professional development as best as you can as an organization to match the learning style of any sort of employee that you may have? So examine your professional development, examine your training, and also, is it happening only one at one point when they walk through the door on their orientation first day, or is it happening consistently throughout the tenure of their time at your organization? Equitable use suggests and also promotes that that's happening consistently. We all know we get emails about like updates on terms, on like, oh, we just got an update and we're adding this new tool. You all should be like well up to date with that. And if those are happening, providing training for that too. So creating a plan and a schedule that creates a flywheel of training for your staff and also folks that, maybe are using technology that aren't a part of staff. Um, I'm going to go through a few other things. Those were just the other big main points that I wanted to highlight, but making sure that your teams are inclusive, what stakeholders are present when you're creating those trainings, those professional developments. Are there community members that are a part of, the training process, and or are they a part of like creating that structure of training for folks because they are stakeholders? Um, Here's another one that, like, as we become more comfortable, Carolyn and I were talking about like working from home prior to the call. And when the pandemic came about, you'd be surprised at how many folks approached N10 about um what are we why are we providing tech for folks? They already have like, laptops at home, and I think that's an assumption that a lot of people make. And also, like, if you are requiring pieces of tech for work to get done, then it is incumbent upon you to provide that for your new staff. So the BYOB or the BYOT, bring your own technology, is something that's maybe a barrier for folks who maybe aren't making very much too, depending on what you're paying them, to be able to do that. That may be their whole paycheck, their first paycheck, and that's just not something that is tenable for a lot of folks. So making sure that you are providing whatever tech they need in order to get the work done. Um, let's see. Let's move forward. Let's talk about data use, the usage of technology within nonprofits. minimizing extractive data practices. And this is why it's at the top of the list, because I know there's a lot of like you all at least percolating within your minds about the hot topic now, which is AI. And I'm not going to dedicate this entire presentation to AI or to AI. I could. But I want to stay on topic, but I do want to say that this does include AI and probably is like the headline of like extractive data policies and practices is like the first dot point is AI. And I would a way in which to like navigate this as someone who's working in nonprofit, but also someone who maybe is at the levers of power within a nonprofit, is making sure that you are being prudent and critical of new tools that are coming in. And that means going through with a fine tooth comb and understanding just exactly how they have their hands on your organization in terms of data, data that you are like willingly sharing and plugging in, but also data that you may not know you are sharing. And that means being very meticulous in how that machine works too. You don't want to inadvertently share, any of your constituents or community members' data or demographic data or identifying data to a company that created a piece of technology that you're working with, and now you can't get it back. And or now it's out there and now you have to do a crisis management or a communications plan to let the community know, hey, we may have messed up and like there is an explanation, but it won't be good to hear. That's all. We've all been a part of those plans too, and I would just caution folks to ease up on the urgency to acquire new pieces of technology because they're shiny and new and they're the hot new term. Those will come and go. We always have them. AI is different, but it's also still it holds that mantle of being able to uh, create a very shiny luster for a lot of folks. And a lot of folks do come to us and say, we're missing the bus. We're missing, oh, we are so behind the ball on like, oh, how do we do this with AI? And it's like, does it even make sense? Or are you just like all hyped up on this new thing and don't even know how it's going to fit into your home? And I've been a part of that where I'm like, we didn't need this, and somehow it's getting shoehorned into my work. So that's my big long like piece on like extractive data policies, but it really is rooted in like slowing down and making sure that the tools that you have or the tools that you're bringing in are and are what you want to be using, and also you're familiar with and have a deep understanding of what data you're sharing with them. So that means having a protected stored data plan. Where is that stored? Is that on a server? Is that in the cloud? How is that being stored? And how are you monitoring it and making sure that it is secure in all sorts of ways? Um, I think also a few other things, encouraging self-determination. And this is a bit more like tactical. So I know some of y'all are probably joining being like, yeah, these are general like thoughts on things, but also there's practice in here as well. And this is one of them that I think about in terms of the usage of, the equitable usage of data. And that's encouraging self-determination. How are you collecting data from your staff? How are you collecting data from your community members? What does that look like, sound like, and feel like? And what I mean by that is, here's the example I'm going to use. So at the top of the call, and even in my like name right here, it says like Diné Navajo. So I'm half Navajo and I'm half Black, and so I'm biracial. Growing up in central Kansas, there were standardized tests that we would take, the Scantron dot forms, and we do the demographic stuff first before we took the test. Our test was called the ITBS test. Um, and I think it was called like the Iowa Test of Basic Skills or something like that. And that was elementary school. But oftentimes it was only pick one in your demographic. So it was either Black or like Native American. And it was like five options too. So like I was like, I need to do both of these. I can no lo I I could no sooner rip, and identify one as like more than the other. My parents, either one of them would be upset by that too. And so, but oftentimes I was forced to choose. And cool, fine. I guess for like, clean data on that end in the 90s. But also, I would encourage, what this means by self-determination is providing more options for folks, and also the very like specific, um, tactical piece of that is when you're collecting that data, making some of those fields, if not like the majority of them, multiple selection. And those of us who work in tech or are like, really living in like an Excel spreadsheet are probably like internally like, no, it makes for messy, messy reports. It makes for messy data when you have multiple selections. But what I would say to that is like, well, that's the human experience. Humans are not like, Excel spreadsheets. They are, nuanced, beautiful, and like have multiple identities that inhabit those things. So when you're collecting that data, encouraging the self-determination where you can when you're collecting demographic data or that multiple selection piece. And I think that in what we've learned by that within the last 10 years is that people appreciate that. People who have multiple identities are more, see more, feel more seen, and are more inclined to participate in your organization because they know that like this organization sees a whole human. So that's my piece on, um, the equitable usage of data and how it's being used in and out of an organization. And how do you procure technology? Are you spending those funds in a smart way? Is it, um, are you just happy to have the money? Are you just like, how is that sitting? And is there a long-term plan? And do you have a technology roadmap that is guiding how you're, interfacing with technology, whatever tool that you're using? I'll give another example because I love examples and I love anecdotes. And all of us that have worked in nonprofit probably have like so many. But I remember I was working for years ago for Boys and Girls Clubs. I was the area director over clubs of like a specific part of town. And um, the powers that be, admin, had gotten this grant. They quickly submitted this grant, got this money, didn't know how they were going to spend it, and so they bought a bunch of iPads. And that's when iPads were becoming a really big thing. Bought a bunch of iPads, and it was like, I want to say like 200 of them. They bought 200, and there was no forethought of like the actual, like, we're giving these to kids, so there needs to be like bumpers on them, so because kids drop things. What software needs to be installed on all of them to keep them safe so they're not going into questionable websites. Um, all of those things were not thought of that I, as like, the one that was now responsible for distributing them to people or to kids had to live with, and it didn't feel good. And what did those iPads do? Not because of anything I could do, but like that was my response was like, we need software on these and we need like, all of the cases. So because kids are going to drop these. And it wasn't thought through and it wasn't a part of the budget. And so what did those iPads do? They sat in a closet and collected dust, brand new for 3 years. And that's what I mean when folks are chomping at the bit to want to fold something in, but there's no forethought or prudence and contingency on how are we going to keep and maintain these and be a good steward of these tools. So I think about that in terms of technology procurement all the time. And I don't know where those iPads are now. I would hope that they got like good usage out of them in some way. But oftentimes we have that story of like the closet full of iPads that we're like, gosh, that like came and went, and now it's not even like an important thing anymore. So, how are you keeping them sustainable? And how are you planning for if, any of those people that like are implementing IT or doing that work bounce. If they leave and find a new job, is there a contingency plan on the historical and informational data that that person and knowledge that, that person has as the only sole person in that role? So thinking about those technology strategic plans is important, even more so now than then. Okay, so let's talk about funding really quick too. And I kind of alluded to it a bit with those like grants that were like, oh, we need the money, and then we now we don't know how to implement it. We painted ourselves into this corner. Um, I think a few things, if you are in conversation and partnership with any philanthropic organization, a foundation, these are good guidelines to have in your back pocket to ask of if you have like an not only like a a grantee funder relationship, but like an outside like, hey, we work in the same community. I'm very familiar with you all, and we run into each other online or offline, and I happen to get, you know, wind of more opportunities for funding, or I'm a part of a community team to inform how they're going to fund. That's oftentimes we get those like asks, right? So investing in appropriately in technology, and that means being more as a funder, being more succinct and clear and giving depth to like technology in whatever, funding you're giving out, and not just it being like technology, 30%, 10K. That's it. What is that? How are we supposed to tease that out? You know, providing and suggesting to funders that there needs to be much more explanation, and also in that like potential grant, being able to line out how this grant is also going to fund the contingency that we talked about, the technology strategic plan, or the long-term security of these tools that we're going to have to buy to implement this work program tool. So, thinking about that when you have access to those funders is important. Um, I think also just personally and like organization wide of investing in whatever technology you're folding in and doing it again, same way, following that strategic plan that you have is it timely? Are we doing this because this, my mom used to tell me this, when we were out shopping, I'd like roll up to the cart with like a toy and she's like, is this a want or a need? And it's like, it's always just a want. So really asking yourself that, or organizationally, what is this a want because we're like feeling the pressure that there is no pressure, you know, because it's shiny and new? Or is this something we actually do need that would enhance our work, our impact, and our mission? Um, I think also, a few other things in terms of uh, funding are support experimentation and failure. And that is specifically the failure piece. When oftentimes I consult with other organizations, when they bring me in to be like, we're doing this project management piece, we need some like, structure and like guidance on how to like change into it to offer insight on like decision making and like project planning. Oftentimes I'll tell them, where are you folding in failure? Where are you folding in failure into your work? And I know that's harsh on a lot of people's ears, but one thing I will offer is that what program or project that you have ever done hasn't had a hiccup, hasn't had failure. And if you are expecting perfection across the board, you will disappoint yourself. Fold in failure into your work, in your implementation, and into your whatever tool that you're funding, and make sure that not only is it folded in and expected, because it will happen, we're human, that's what happens, but also that there's no punitive strings attached to any failure or a specific person that it is. It just didn't work out. We knew there was going to be some barriers and hiccups that we were unaware of. And being okay with that and releasing people from this, like, oh my gosh, we failed. I'm going to get a horrible write up. That can make people show up in a better way when you fold in failure and it's expected. into whatever thing, tool that you're funding. So that is funding. Corporate funding. Don't conflate produce donation with cash funding or product donation, excuse me. Um, don't conflate it. So if they're, again, back to the iPads in the closet, product donating, if they're donating that, closet full of iPads, that's not the same as like a cash donation. And also, like, if it's just a straight up donation, there needs, it's hard to say no to donations as a nonprofit, but also this is like where the rubber hits the road of being like, we thank you for this donation of whatever tech that you're providing, but we don't accept tech without any sort of safety contingency that's folded in to that work. It's what we talked about earlier, too, creating the contingency of whatever tech or practice or training is going to be involved. So if they're not willing to provide like a staff person, like 10 hours of their month to check in to make sure that things are updated, not only in the training and professional development, but the tool itself, then we can't like in good conscience and in good faith implement this tool that you're generously giving us. We just can't. It's not possible. Um, Giving for impact and not visibility. Again, a lot of my stories sit with Boys and Girls Club, and I love Boys and Girls Club, but a lot of times it's like where I really took some licks and like really learned some hard lessons. And this is one of them where you're at the club and kids are, everywhere. And then like a bunch of suits walks in. A suits walk in with the executive director or CEO, and you make eye contact with the CEO, and they're like, this is so and so from Columbia Bank. This is so and so from Sunflower Bank, and they're the president. And can they wanted to they wanted to donate stuff, and they said they showed up today, and so I brought them here so they could volunteer with some kids. And now you're like, okay, this is for visibility because there's cameras everywhere. The comms person's there all of a sudden who's never been in the club. But like I say that because that felt not good. That felt not good as a staff member, and that shouldn't feel good to any of those staff members that walked in with those suits. But oftentimes where we have the blinders on of like it's money and it's donated and we can't take no for an answer, or we can't say no. And so oftentimes you put staff in unsavory positions because you want it to be visible, but there's no preparation or forethought with it. So being able to have your boundaries when you're interacting with corporate entities is super important when you're creating that like technology strategic plan. Um, and I'm going to go over a few other ways, and this is the last section. And so we have about 4 minutes. So I'm going to like try and breeze through this because I want to create time for Q&A. Um, and we're going to roll into creating technology. So this is more so like if you are interacting like with a salesperson or anyone, or you're creating your own, there are some pieces with that. But if you have an opportunity to be a part of advising, oh, we're creating this tool for nonprofits. Perfect. I have some opinions. I have many. Um, Making sure that you're following ethical sales guidelines and prioritizing community outcomes and using, more importantly, I love the phrase community outcomes here because oftentimes the tell is people are like, oh, we have this tool that's specific for nonprofit work. And they use very like corporate jargon that I've never heard nonprofit people use. And so I mean, I know there's like exceptions, but also, I always use community members. And so a lot of times they'll be like your clients. And yes, there are nonprofits out there that use, but it's not, I feel like it's usually community members. And so when they say clients, I'm like, how informed are you in creating this tool? So prioritizing those community outcomes for, any of those tools that are trying to get sold to you and investigating the price of it as it relates to you and your nonprofit. So, is the price equitable? Is it scaled to your budget? Do they have a sliding scale with like, okay, if your budget's from like 500K to 1 million, here's what we're offering. And also, it's the same product, it's not changed as it goes up with your like budget. That oftentimes that happens. And so I think another piece of the sales and marketing piece, as you're getting like sold all of these like flashy new tools, is making sure that if you are getting offered like some sort of steep discount or a pro bono uh, add-on of like, because you're a nonprofit, we're going to do this, making sure that the terms of that match your own technology strategic plan and being like, well, you said the terms were like only for 6 months, but actually, according to us, we in our like guidelines and policy, we need you to provide that training and like constant like security update like for 2 years in, and stating that and naming that, and oftentimes that's when like the deal falls through or whatever. And so that's what I mean, at the bottom of this list, being intentional with pro bono services is like, you know, my grandpa always used to say there's no such thing as a free lunch. And like, for the most part in this scenario, if it's free, there should be some like deep and steep questioning about folk that about what is getting offered and from the people who are like cutting the deal. So a few things on like the creating piece. Um, and let's see here. We talked about embracing nonprofit diversity. That was at the beginning of the beginning of the presentation. But I think one thing that does stick out to me in implementing any of these like creating technology for the sector or for your community is oftentimes it feels as though when you've created something, we need to keep it here. We need to keep it within the organizational walls. No one can have it. We have a competitor across town that we can't share that with. And I think that feast or famine type of mentality of that like very guarded, this is our stuff, and we don't want big brothers or big sisters to get a hold of this is so detrimental to the sector. And so oftentimes all it takes is like you being like, I think this other organization that does very similar work to us could benefit from this. And I just want our community to like thrive. And I don't really particularly care what organization they're doing it with. And I think having that like spirit of, camaraderie, community is important. And it's, oftentimes it gets lost in specific places. So being able to, if you have something that you've created, sharing it with similar organizations across the country or across your community is important. Um, I think lastly, and then I'll stop and we'll go into Q&A, is treating projects as ongoing processes. So similar to folding in failure, but also like treating a project as an ongoing process, and it doesn't really have an end. So what is the 1 year after we've launched? What is the 1 year checkup? What is the 1.5 year checkup? Is there like an immediate checkup that we need to do? And what is the process for continually checking in on those things? Will serve you better as opposed to just leaving it, we implemented it and like fingers crossed, I hope it goes well. Like that's something that I think, I've been a part of. And, as a lesson learned, I was like, I didn't check in on this and it's been a year and this is falling completely apart. And that's, failure that I own. I was in my 20s, but like also like, that's something that like is super important, and it provides a lot of like growth for yourself, but also like it's important because it impacts the communities that you serve. So I'm going to end here and I'm going to go into not the discussion, but I'm going to go into Q&A. Maybe I didn't have a Q&A slide. I thought I did, Carolyn, but apparently I didn't. So,
All right, hope everybody can
great.
see that. If you do have questions, go ahead and get them in while we have Tristan here. We can ask him. I have a quick question. Well, it's kind of a quick, but maybe a big question. So I noticed in your presentation and your examples, a lot of the examples that you used
Hmm.
included power dynamics and
Mm.
particularly power
Hmm.
imbalances.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're
Hmm.
getting a pro bono donation,
Hmm.
or when the suits are walking in to your Boys and
Hmm.
Girls Club,
Yeah.
and you said, you feel like you can't say no
Yeah.
to those. And I feel like that is like a kernel of this equity
Yeah.
question. So I wondered
Hmm.
if you could talk a little bit more about, you gave us a lot of great examples of it
Hmm.
happening. that you're
Hmm.
in a power
Yeah.
imbalance. Do
Mhm.
you, through your work and through this equity guide, do you have advice for the people listening
Yeah.
about, I want to say fighting that, but like
Yeah.
strategies to
Yeah.
take on those situations where
Yeah.
you are not in a position of power and that
Hmm.
is creating an inequity in the
Hmm.
situation with technology?
Um, and that's such a great question, and I have an answer, multiple answers. And also, like, I just want to acknowledge that, like, it's harder for some people to like have tough conversations, specifically when there's a power dynamic involved too. I am not one of those people. I've always been one of those, like, I would say very social people that's been like, this is wrong. And I don't know why this is, regardless of who it is. And I feel like it's become more honed as I've gotten older and a bit more sweeter and respectful, but still firm. And I think that really, it starts with you. And is that something that is within you to do? Um, and when I'm helping facilitate groups or like discussion where I'm not a staff member, I'm just there as a facilitator, oftentimes I have the opportunity to say, I want to name a power dynamic in this room. And that is that the C suite is here and all of the staff members who are experiencing this thing are here. And there may be folks who don't feel comfortable. That is, speaking their full truth. And I think it really does just start by naming that power dynamic. And that can like exist in like staff meetings, but it can also exist in, maybe not, in the moment, but also like I think it exists across a lot of different like categories too. Oftentimes I was the only black person working in an all-white organization, and so you know I feel like at times I didn't really have the safety to say what I needed to say. And also, I think that encourages folks who are, part of the majority, who are white, in that example, to be able to speak up because there's a lot less at risk for them too. Um, and I think that's something that like folks have to be comfortably uncomfortable with speaking up and naming power dynamics, because that's the whole point of like a hierarchy is
Hmm.
to like not name the hierarchy, but it
Hmm.
but it for it to be heavily implied.
Hmm.
And so I think that really is, you know, being able to like name it is important. But I also want to just like call out, if you're a part of like a marginalized community and you're like one of one in whatever organization you're in, being able to like I tell people this, specifically folks of color, that are the only person in their like white nonprofit. It's like if you continually are running into this mental calculus, it's not worth it. Get out. You don't have to speak up in these meetings. And I know that's a luxury to be like, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, or whatever, or I'm shifting to another organization. But also, long term, I've been there where it weighs on you and it's much more taxing, to continue to stay in an organization where you are running into both like organizational issues, but also just like for yourself, the anxiety that comes with that too. And so I always quote like, this rap song, it's called No Role Models, but it's like, don't save them. They don't want to be saved. Like, and so I think you have to do that calculus of like, is the juice worth the squeeze for me, like, bringing it up? Happy to, but if this place is going to fall on like ears that aren't listening, then I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to name that power dynamic. It's not worth it. So
Yeah.
I think it's like a both and of like, yes, name it, but also that calculus of risk for folks who are marginalized is much higher. Like
Yeah.
that job may be on the line for them as opposed to like one of their white colleagues doing it. Or like if it's for a queer person, it's like that calculus and like that like risk may be higher for them than like a cis hetero person. And so I think there's a lot of dynamics that inform how you name a power dynamic or don't name it.
Yeah. Yeah. You might not have the job, you might not get the grant, you might not have
Yeah.
the donor. So
Yeah.
but I really that stood out to me of what you were
Mhm.
talking about, maybe more to think about. And
Mhm.
the other thing that I think you said a couple of
Mhm.
times was the learning piece. And nonprofits
Yeah.
are learning organizations for the most
Mhm.
part, but sometimes we can get so busy with what we're
Mm,
doing that
hmm.
we don't spend that time on making sure everyone knows how to use the technology, everybody's
Yeah.
onboarded correctly, but then
Yeah.
also maybe there are some learning opportunities as well around equity and power
Mhm.
and being able to name what's happening and around the technology as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that definitely. I want to.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to go quickly
No,
through
that's
this.
fine.
But I
I
could
ran
talk to you
long.
all day, basically. But I
Happy
want to go
to.
quick over our learning objectives, which I think you hit on. And definitely, if the people will download this equity guide, you like crunch tons of information into this tiny little presentation. So I definitely recommend people to go look at the full thing. But we wanted to understand equity issues impacting nonprofits and technology, learn how funding equitable nonprofit technology ensures better outcomes. Like you said, have that strategic plan, be able to go to your funder with this strategic
Mhm.
plan and be able to identify why getting a short-term something or a donated something doesn't fit with what makes sense for your organization. Discuss the role of nonprofit technology in disrupting existing inequitable models, and learn the role of your board in tech equity. We didn't quite get to that one, but there's a whole other report PDF that you can get with some questions for your board members to talk
Mhm.
about technology and equity. So that will help people. I know we're almost at time, so I'm trying
Mhm.
to be respectful of the people who have joined us, but I do want to invite you back to our first webinar of 2026, which will be January 21st from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific on Zoom. This is our annual nonprofit tech roundtable. We have our experts from Community IT, having your smart friends who know a lot about technology and a lot about nonprofits, and you can sit around. They're going to tell us what the trends were, what they're expecting trends to be, and you can ask them your questions. So it's great opportunity and experience, and it's very popular every year. So I'm always excited to moderate it. And this year we are adding in our Director of Client Services, Jenny Huff-Talon, and she is just amazing. She has this wealth of experience talking to thousands of our clients over the years about what they're worried about, what's happening, what they're seeing, what they're doing, what they're preparing for. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to drop the link in there, but you can also find it on our site at communityit.com. It's Wednesday, January 21st at 3 p.m. And of course, you can sign up for any other webinars there, and there's lots of free resources as well. So we went over a little bit. I'm really sorry about that, but if you're still with us, you can join us on Reddit in just a minute. I'm sharing that as well. It's r/nonprofit IT management. Please don't forget to, as you exit, to fill out the short survey for that chance at the gift card. And I just want to thank you, Tristan, so much for your time. An hour of anyone's time is a gift. And we appreciate you giving us the benefit of your experience, walking us through the concerns that are in this equity guide. And I hope our audience can use it. And I just want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being here and happy to talk about, everything under the sun as it relates to tech. And so happy to like be in dialogue with you, Carolyn. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And I was saying, I know you have a whole other presentation on AI, and
Yes.
I would love to have you back in 2026, and we'll talk about all of the equity
Oh,
and
yes.
power dynamics and
Put me in.
security and trust issues with
Yeah.
AI, all of the AI tools. So I look forward to that as well. Thank you, everyone who joined us in the audience. Thank you, those who are listening on the podcast, seeing us on YouTube. And we will see you in January 2026. Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you.